Gold has hit several all-time highs in 2024. So what does that mean for M&A? I'm with George Salamis. He is the executive chair of Integra Resources. George, welcome back to Kitco.
Michael, thank you for having me in your brand new studios here in Vancouver.
George, bring us up to the state right now with Integra Resources and what you're doing in Idaho.
So the DeLamar project is our lead project of the two major projects that we own, Idaho and Nevada. Those are the two operating fronts, but DeLamar is kind of the lead project, being the most advanced. So we've got two missions to accomplish this year. One, kick off the all-important, all-encompassing NEPA process, which is the federal permitting process in the U.S., all-important. And while we're doing that, bringing the project from PFS, which is what we did 2 years ago, to final feasibility at the end of this year.
Step back and explain what the project is. What type of mine could it be?
Sure. It's a large gold-silver deposit that was mined several instances over the past 100 years, but most recently by Kinross. Mm-hmm. And Kinross mined happily there for the better part of about 20 years. And they shut the mine down due to low gold and silver price environments in the late 1990s, leaving behind what we felt was a very large, very meaningful gold-silver resource behind that we believed could be heap leached. So since 2017, we've essentially done all of the requisite studies to get it to PFS and now at feasibility.
Mm-hmm. You're talking about permitting right now and putting in. There has been a little bit of permitting hiccups right now. I think of what happened with Trilogy Metals and not getting road access. There has been difficulty advancing projects when I think about Ioneer or Lithium Americas as well, too. How comfortable are you with developing and then forwarding a mine in the U.S.?
Yeah, so our situation is a bit different from others in that this was a mine that was in operation up until essentially the year 2000.
Okay.
And so it is a brownfield site. It's a disturbed site. There's no question about that. And there's been remediation work that's been done to the satisfaction of the state and the federal authorities to fully remediate it. But it is a disturbed site. There's a lot that's known about it. And we've done, probably in my entire career, I've never been involved in that much environmental baseline work. We've done essentially 4 years worth of that work to get us to the point now where we're going to be submitting the project into the NEPA process. So hopefully we'll have an easier go of it than others.
You are doing engineering work. One hiccup, I should say, or a stumbling block in recent years has been cost inflation around CapEx and things like that. How does that look right now?
So our last study, the PFS that we released first quarter of 2022, is you remember those days. I mean, I think you can squarely point to that time as being kind of maybe the peak of inflation. Not that inflation has come off significantly since then, but at least we have a study that has had a lot of elements of inflation already baked into it. Yeah. So the expectation is it can't get any worse from an inflationary perspective. That said, we're looking at all aspects of the project in the feasibility right now. All these trade-offs that we can look at, maybe we don't put a lot of this CapEx up front. Maybe we schedule it and scale it over the life of mine, further into the mine life. We're doing optimizations because there's a lot of optionality on the deposit, very, different ore types, different leach characteristics, different locations. And so we're looking at optimizing how we best mine that and maybe mitigate some of the inflationary pressure alongside that.
George, one thing that I hear frequently is getting people, and that being one of the cost inflation drivers right now.
Indeed, getting people is tough. Thankfully, from Integra Gold to Integra Resources, we've had a chance to kind of season the team for the better part of the last 12 years. And so that bodes well for what we need to do next. If we were to build this team from scratch today, starting from zero, it would be a much different, much tougher thing to accomplish. So we have a team in place. That said, there is really an absence of new blood into this industry, which is, I think, plaguing everybody.
We've hit several all-time highs for gold. Silver's been taking a run right now. Is it, when you're looking at green lighting projects right now, are we at the stage of putting in a new benchmark or a new floor for gold or silver?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly feels like the tailwinds are feeling a bit better at our backs. That said, nobody on our team certainly is high-fiving or cracking open the champagne, as it were. There's been a lot of value destruction in the last 4 years, in the mining space at large. I believe that there's a bit of a crisis of confidence in the way investors look at the mining sector. A lot of that, I believe, is related to mine site inflationary pressure, compression of margins. And I think what it's going to take to turn that around is we need to see first the producers starting to make real money. Right? The gold price is going to help that. But hopefully that the gold price combined with at least stabilized inflationary pressure at the mine site will create real margins for these companies, the producers, and finally they'll start producing real cash. And then maybe that becomes the catalyst for the generalists to come back into the sector, we hope.
You anticipated my next question, just in terms of, it seems like a show me right now as well, because I mean, I look at it, I mean, several all-time highs, but the GDX is still up only 10% year to date. It's still nowhere near the highs that it hit this decade right now. And then, you know, the juniors right now still are not really benefiting in this market.
That's the truth. And we've seen it. It's not like we haven't seen this before in other cycles, right? I mean, I've been in the business 30 years. I've seen a bunch of these cycles. They typically all start off this way, exuberance with respect to the commodity prices, lagging effect with respect to valuations, so that gap widens. This time around is probably the widest gap that I've seen. But typically that gap starts to close. And again, I think a lot of it is going to be driven by confidence, reestablishment of confidence in us as a sector.
M&A has been pretty good right now. So I look at, there was Alamos picking up Argonaut for $325 million. This week we saw G Mining Ventures competing at $875 million for Union Gold.
Indeed, there have been a couple of good M&A transactions. In fact, Alamos Argonaut and I think Calibre and Marathon, I think those two should be in a pole position for best M&A deal of the last 12 months. Really opportunistic M&A deals favoring the buyer, obviously. There'll be great deals for the owners of those assets long term. G Mining, obviously another great deal, really good synergies. So it's starting to pick up. But again, I think what's going to be the real catalyst for M&A, which is quite frankly why people a lot of investors invest in the junior miners, specifically the pre-development space, is the attraction of M&A. Maybe someday this company gets taken over. And for that to happen, I feel like the natural buyers, the producers, need to start feeling better about themselves and with their own valuations. And I think that comes through their own mine site performance enhancements. Well, let's see what the next 3 quarters bring.
Speak a little bit more about kind of feeling better about it right now as well, too. I mean, they should just have a blowout quarter right now that's coming in. I mean, is it just going to be, is it going to be stock performance? Is it going to be gushing cash flows? What is it going to be in terms of getting that confidence back?
One hopes gushing cash flows.
Yeah.
I think this sort of this mantra that we've seen over the last 2 years of mine site inflationary pressure, if that continues to climb, the enthusiasm with respect to investors and their potential returns might be dampened. However, I think if the producers all of a sudden start to show, hey, we've got inflation under wraps at our mine site, we've got things have stabilized, that plus, the enhancements in the gold price, I think that should bring people back.
Want to talk about your own M&A that you did, and then that was about a year and a bit ago, and that was with Millennial, and you have the project Nevada North. Maybe you can bring us up to date on that within Integra.
Sure. So it was consolidation that makes sense, and I believe consolidation makes sense in most instances in our business. There are far too many of us companies out there chasing a limited pool of capital. So shrinking that pool of capital through M&A, I think 9 times out of 10 makes a lot of sense. So I would encourage it. And, in fact, we saw in our own backyard in Idaho, was it last week or the week before, Revival Gold merging with Ensign Gold, getting a second leg, a second front open to them, not just one project, but now 2 oxide, potentially heap leachable projects in the Western U.S. So that makes a lot of sense. And it made a lot of sense for us. For us, the second front that we acquired through Millennial was Nevada North. And it's these great, potentially low-cost projects, which we released a PA on last year. Tremendous results in terms of potential economic returns. We need to now de-risk that project further by taking it to PFS.
George, I'm going to ask you to step back from Integra a minute because I'm going to pick on you because you're an Idaho specialist. Because I've seen your social feeds. You down there often. You mentioned Reunion Gold. There's also Hecla that operates down in that area. And thinking about Black Pine, what are you keeping an eye on right now in Idaho in terms of you think that are going to be milestones or projects in the state?
You know what really sort of rang home for me. I just came back from Washington D.C. just to kind of start the permitting lobbying process, if you will, in the U.S. Capitol. One of the words that was bandied about with much enthusiasm was Perpetua and the Stibnite project. And this is a project that has a long history of permitting impasse, as we know. They've been in the NEPA process essentially for 8 years. It feels to those in Washington, D.C., it feels to those of us who are trying to develop in projects in Idaho that they're getting very close to the end. And case in point with that was, you may have seen last week or the week before, Exim Bank, which is the Export-Import Bank of the U.S., essentially a financial arm of the U.S. government, basically showing up to Perpetua and saying, we're willing to lend you $1.8 billion of project financing on really good terms, subject, of course, to regulatory approvals and other things that they need to accomplish. But that to me, and that to many in Washington, was a very good sign, because the feeling is that a U.S. arm of financing within the government would not be stepping up with terms such as that if the U.S. government did not itself believe that a permit is far away. In other words, their record of decision is, we believe, close, and I believe that the term sheet that was put in front of Perpetua a few weeks ago is proof of that.
Smartest analysis you heard on gold prices, precious metal prices.
Oh, gosh. We all do a lot of reading, right?
Yeah.
I think the biggest rabbit hole that I went down was a couple weeks ago. It was actually Easter Monday, and I started reading every piece that I could on the U.S. debt situation. $34 trillion worth of debt, within the next 10 or 15 years, going to $50 trillion, and what it requires to service that debt in a higher inflationary environment. And then looking at and reading about all of the options that are available to the U.S. Federal Reserve to deal with that debt situation. Turns out they don't have a lot of ammunition to deal with it. Cutting rates doesn't do it. Fiscal restraint from a government perspective, well, nobody's going to do that in an election year. So the options available to the U.S. government to deal with this spiraling debt situation are very limited. And I think that that's an environment that could really do well for gold, ultimately. Times of uncertainty, right? It's perfect storm.
Milestones at Integra over the next 12 months.
Entering the NEPA process officially this coming summer with the submission of our mine plan of operations, which is a really detailed document, spells out how we plan to build, operate, and remediate the site. So that gets submitted for public commentary. So that's a big milestone. And then finally wrapping up with the feasibility study at the end of the year. One thing that some of our investors are quite keen about is finally we're going back to being explorers again. And we'll be mobilizing a drill rig out to the Nevada North projects. There are a lot of really what I would call kind of no-brainer, high-priority targets that are just sitting there begging to be drilled. So we'll be drilling those this coming summer. So we're really excited about that.
I want to get an opportunity for a shout out as well too. You're involved with Invictus that's going to be coming to Vancouver. What is it, and what does it mean for Vancouver?
The Invictus Games, yeah, a tremendous coup by the Invictus organization to land the games in 2025, February 2025.
Right, so we should back up as well too, because before you got into the mining game, you have a military background as well.
Correct, yes. Myself and Bob Quartermain, who I believe you had on the show very recently, were both honorary colonels in the military. Bob's with the Air Force. One could say that it's a bit of a country club, but whatever. The infantry is where I sit. No, truly a great cause. And so one of the things that I'm involved with in conjunction with the military.
Sorry, again, we should back up. So Invictus is started by Prince Harry, I believe, as well, too. And then that's that's a games to kind of celebrate people in the military, I believe.
Yeah, military and first responders.
Oh, yeah.
And so, some life-changing experiences that they get. Former serving members of the military and first responders who might be suffering from various ailments, re-engaged in society through sport, and it's proven to be a tremendously positive experience for those who participate in these games. So we'll be having these games here February next year. So my involvement both in the Canadian military and the Canadian resource industry, trying to bring these two groups together because there are a lot of similarities between the two. There's a resourcefulness both within military members, serving military members, and the mining community, which is, I believe, unparalleled. And I believe there's a natural fit there from a support and funding perspective. And so that's one of the things that I'm trying to do for the Invictus Games.
George, thanks for your time.
Michael, thank you.
My name is Michael McRae with Kitco Mining.